Leadership is hard. Titles change overnight, expectations pile up fast, and nobody hands you a survival map. That's why Leadership on the Rocks exists. Hi, I'm Bethany Rees, leadership coach, author, and speaker. And for 2 decades, I've been equipping leaders to navigate the wild, unpredictable terrain of leading people. Whether you're a new leader trying to find your footing or a seasoned leader trying to reclaim clarity, this podcast gives you the tools, truth, and encouragement you need to thrive in both your professional and personal lives. Each week, I sit down with leaders who have weathered storms, climbed mountains, and learned what it takes to lead without losing yourself in the process. If you're ready to build steady, grounded, life-giving leadership, this is your place. Let's climb together.
The real life sheep, they are not real keen, so they're really dependent, and that should be what we think about when we see the Bible talking about us as sheep, is that let us be completely dependent on the Good Shepherd, because the idea that he's the one guiding us and directing us into all things, it's really easy to lock into something that we're familiar with and we think we have the skills and the expertise to do. Not that God doesn't want to use those things, but we got to realize that he's much more capable than we are.
This is the Leadership on the Rocks podcast, where we equip and empower leaders like you to thrive in and create harmony between your professional and personal lives. I'm your host, Bethany Rees, and in today's episode, we're going to be talking with Sheep Feast founder Mark Rowan about discipling your business and leading with faith, clarity, and systems. Mark Rowan is the founder of Sheep Feast, a faith-based business dedicated to helping Christian entrepreneurs bring clarity, discipline, and structure to their companies through practical tools, training, and community. With a background in communications and marketing, he equips leaders to simplify their systems, strengthen client relationships, and build scalable impact. Mark also hosts the 2000 Cubit Rule podcast and champions the vision of seeing 1 million discipled. Welcome to the Leadership on the Rocks podcast, Mark. I'm so happy to have you.
Thanks for having me, Bethany. It is great to be with you and excited for this conversation.
I am too. And I got to say, you're the founder of Sheep Feast. And I know when most people think about leadership, they think about leadership books. Maybe they expect frameworks, spreadsheets, personality assessments, maybe one or two. But Mark, nope, we're going to start off with some sheep. And before anyone panics, I gotta say this episode is not about starting a farm, even though I'm close to being Amish on that one, but we're not talking about actual farming. We're going deeper with that topic of what it means to feed the people entrusted to your leadership. And this just so aligns with my heart in leadership. So Mark, let's just start off with the name. You're the founder of Sheep Feast, and immediately that catches attention. What inspired that name?
Yeah, and a lot of people will see it and say Sheep Fest, which is, that's not far off either. We like to party over here. But no, it is Sheep Feast, and it is directly based out of John 21:17, where Jesus is talking to Peter. They're having this conversation about, do you love me and all that? And he says, feed my sheep. And of course, that's where we get the idea behind who we are. But it's not just that in of itself. I did grow up on a sheep farm, and my parents did have a camp called Psalm 23 Camp. So there's a lot going on behind the scenes.
Man, awesome. So, feel free to throw in those sheep metaphors and analogies if need be. But I love it that it's, Jesus asking Peter, that's the foundation of it. Do you love me? Feed my sheep. And that's what we're called to do as believers. And especially if we're in charge of influencing other people, whether you're leading your family, the community, or a business, feed the sheep. So it's perfect. So you talk a lot about discipleship, discipling your business. And it's not a phrase most people hear. Anybody that went to get a master's degree in, leadership, maybe an MBA, they don't talk about discipleship unless maybe you go to a faith-based school for that. But what does it actually mean in practice?
Yeah, so that's true. In the business world and even in faith-based, you don't really think about business discipleship, how those work together. But I see that conversation happening more and more. And it's really, what does it look like for your business to be a place where people can encounter God, whether you're faith first in what you do or not? And that just comes from like, how do we do customer service? How do we, answer the phone? Or how do we, do do our work excellently. And it's all based on how would God do it and how would we do it as believers. And so that's kind of the base idea behind that.
It's so good and so needed. And immediately I think of Chick-fil-A. Like, I am an entrepreneur. I have my business. Now, do I go around proselytizing or hitting people, in the face with the Bible? Absolutely not. I serve them with leadership content. And a lot of times it is with organizations where you cannot talk about faith. And yet, because I am a faith-based person, how I interact and engage with them should always be salt and light of drawing people closer to, man, what's with her and her joy and, this bright light and this enthusiasm and this love and this kindness, like all the fruit of the Spirit. It's so true in how I run my business. Faith is all the way through there, even if I'm not, preaching as I'm doing a leadership workshop, which I'm not. And so you talk about in leadership, it's not just about running the organization, which we'll get into systems and organization because they're important, but you also talk about feeding that inner man, while also building that effective business. So while we'll talk about effective business practices in a minute, let's talk about that inner man. What do you mean by the inner man, feeding the inner man?
Yeah, the Bible talks about out of the heart flows everything, right? And that's my paraphrase. And so, if our heart is not in the right place, don't expect our business to run from the right place, or our families or relationships, all those kind of things. So, that first and foremost, God is after our heart. And in my own journey, I've seen that more and more. Like as I've matured, that's been the focus. You start out your journey with Christ, and you're just in love with him, and so excited and all that. And then as you mature, then he starts kind of pointing out the things in our hearts that need to really be adjusted. And so that's that whole discipleship process. And that is really brought to bear when we're interacting with others. He will use other people,
Mm-hmm.
whether they're like a mentor or maybe there's somebody that just gets on your nerves, but those are things that they can bring to the surface that need to be addressed. And I think, all these things need to work together, right? We're not just who what we do in our work and or our title, all those kind of things, or we're not just, our body. It's a holistic thing, right? We have, our mind, we have our body, but our spirit, all these things work together. And so you need to have them locked in different ways, right? And it really does start in those heart issues. So we don't, while we have a specific service and tools that we use, but we're
Mm-hmm.
always going to bring alongside the quote unquote soft skills as well, bringing in people that have great insight and wisdom to share with the people that we're connected with, because we see that it's going to be a holistic thing that really brings discipleship to a business.
Man, it's so important, focusing on feeding our inner selves. And that comes in your private time. And I love what you said. Oh my goodness, so important. Whatever's on the inside is going to come out, and that's very biblically based. But think about the chaos a lot of leaders go through. And again, whether you're leading a home, maybe you're raising a teenager, oh my goodness, or you're an entrepreneur, or you work for an organization, it doesn't matter what role you're serving in. Whenever the environment becomes chaotic, whatever's on the inside of you, if that's anger, bitterness, anxiety, or if it's good things like love, patience, peace, all the fruit of the Spirit, it's going to come out. And so you don't fix those parts of you during the chaotic times. It comes during your private time, not, in the middle of work. I mean, you hope that the good stuff comes out, but what's inside of you, and you got to feed that. Thank you so much for reminding us of how important that is. Um, why do leaders struggle to integrate that? I think about, we can be so externally focused in our business. I'm focusing on my metrics, my goals, and all of those things I don't have time for. And now I'm going to use some popular buzzwords that I don't necessarily like, but they are kind of true. I don't have time for, private Bible study or meditation on that, or praise, or exercise. I'm going to feel that one right there. Like we say we don't have time for those things when they're really the foundation, because we're focused on all these external things. Can you set us straight on why it's important to get those in the right order?
Yeah, so like I said, the holistic approach of, being whole, it does take all those different things that you mentioned, and it's not necessarily out of our own strength, right? It's like if we're trying to do this just by our own willpower, we will eventually, fail ourselves, and we'll feel like we fail others. And it's honestly, like you said, going back to those moments where we are alone with Jesus and allowing him to work through those, like why asking him questions like why do I have such a difficult time doing this or that, or and like he'll meet us there. And if we give him the space, and we you mentioned our podcast, the 2000 cubit rule, and that's the whole concept behind that. In Joshua 3:4, it talks about the people of Israel are getting ready to go into the promised land. So yay, exciting. But the
Mhm.
instruction was stay 2000 cubits back from the Ark of the Covenant, because why? You don't know where you're going and you don't know how to get there. And so we say that we make room for God to move, and that's across our lives. And so when we do that, whether it's in, your business life, your personal life, doesn't matter. He's always there waiting for us to engage. And, you hear Paul talk about pray without ceasing. Sometimes that can be intimidating. Like, oh, how do I do that? And it's really just, having that relationship, that intimacy with Jesus where, no matter what comes up, we're ready to engage because he's always there anyway. And that's what it looks like to make room for God to move across our lives.
Oh, I love it. I love the name of your podcast. If you just think about it, God goes first. He goes before you in all things. And I so often, confession, I so get ahead of God so many times, especially if I think about man's best practice. And it's so easy. I'm in the leadership space. I'll read amazing leadership books. And yet I will say, I'm going to follow this framework, this path, this plan, and then leave God out of it. And thinking about starting a business, I did that. Another confession. I did that whenever I started my business. I'm going to follow man's best practice. And I wasn't really praying into it as much as I should have. I didn't let God lead. And as I did all the best practice things, I sat there and I'm like, why am I not successful? Why did input not equal output? Oh, because I got ahead of God and I didn't let him guide it. So it took a lot of humbling of sitting there and saying, okay, God, you go first. Show me what that looks like. And just holding on, like surrender. I literally have to physically put my hands out and say, I'm surrendering my business to you, my marketing, my message, my how I serve people. And making that shift has just changed everything about the peace in my heart, finances, and how I serve people. It's been amazing. So thank you for speaking that message. It's so true. And guys, go listen to his podcast on that too. We need it. Let God go first. And thinking about that, I just had this confession, right? Of I can get focused on exactly what I just said, the metrics of following best practices. How do I grow fast, scale quickly? How do I optimize everything? And it's a challenge to another confession. It's a challenge to my leadership mindset. You called it out. You said you're actually not in control of a lot of things. It's more about surrender. So, can you, I guess, encourage us? How do we make that mindset shift of I have to do it in my own strength to no, I actually release so that I can be led? Because in the end, I'm going to sheep here. I'm a dumb sheep. And I will fall into the same hole over and over and over again.
Yeah.
And so you can talk about sheep, you can talk about whatever you want to, but how do I change my mindset for being a dumb sheep to actually being led?
Yeah, you've probably seen that same video meme, right? Where they where they rescue the sheep out of the
Yep.
ditch and tube jumps is right back in there. And that's
Yeah.
something I always tell people when we talk about my history of working with sheep. You brought it out. They are not smart, and we get compared to them over and over again. But I was just saying to another gentleman who actually was on our podcast yesterday. We were having a conversation, I believe. But the idea that we are completely reliant on Jesus, that's what the shepherd's role, right? The real life sheep, they are not real keen. They know how to eat grass, and not a whole lot else. So they're really dependent. And that should be what we think about when we see the Bible talking about us as sheep, is that let us be completely dependent on the good shepherd, because that idea that he's the one guiding us and directing us into all things, it's really easy to lock into something that we're familiar with and we think we have the skills and the expertise to do. Not that God doesn't want to use those things, but we
Yeah.
got to realize that he's much more capable than we are. And so even in our own strength, we have to go back to the Lord. Is like, is this something that I need to be doing in this moment? And then in our weaknesses, of course, that the Bible talks about, he is made strong there. And so this is just this ongoing effort for us to realize that we can't do it all. He's going to bring people around us that we need to rely on, and of course, His Holy Spirit within us,
Mhm.
to really notify us when we're, starting to stray off of the path, right? And that would be the way that I would look at that.
Absolutely. And I feel like the way we start off this episode, the way my brain works, and maybe it's the teacher brain in me, I try to look at chaos and try to put it in some sort of organization. How do I organize chaos? And thinking about the chaos that I feel in life in general, whether that be, raising kids or marriage or finances or job, professional, whatever, it doesn't really matter. It's how can I make sense of this mess? And the way you're starting us off is, well, first, stop trying to control everything and surrender. The reality is we are the dumb sheep. We need to be led. So you have to surrender all of that to God. Ask Him, let Him go first. 2,000 cubits ahead, right? God, where do you want me to go? Where do you want me to serve? So that was like in my head, step one is you really spend private time with God, asking Him, you lead me, I surrender to you. But now there's a but God moment. He also gives us, he is a God of order and structure. Think about his creation and how he created cycles, water cycle, whatever you want, any kind of, there's order to his creation. And he also gave us logical thinking brains. So now let's transition. We know kind of step one, and I hate to oversimplify, I don't really mean that, but step one is really that relationship with God. But also now he's going to say, okay, here's where I want you to go. And he gives us systems and tools to be good stewards of wherever he's called us to go. And so that's a faithful part of leadership. So some people might say, hey, systems feel cold compared to a ministry, a discipleship, all these things that we just talked about. So, how do you see systems as a part of discipleship and following God?
Yeah, 100%, because you think about the word discipleship, guess what is hidden in the middle of that? Discipline. And
Oh,
so there's where you start to see where a system, and just like you said, there is order throughout creation. And of course, we want to be led by the Spirit and, be ready in season and out and all those kind of things. But the base level is to be organized and, have a good system within what you're doing, and no matter what it is that you're trying to do. Is if you're just, whatever goes in the moment, then that long-term effect of that is probably not going to bring the result that you're looking for. And so we can look at the examples, just like you said, across all of that God does. He's very precise. You think of the prophecy of Jesus being born. It wasn't just like they nailed all of that stuff over and over again. If you look at the Old Testament and what God predicted was going to happen, he was, born when he needed to be born, right? And he was resurrected on the exact day and all these kind of things. So it just shows you the heart of God and how he looks and sees everything, and how we can mimic that and really model that in our own lives. And what we do is a great way to go, right? It's not just a, free will it all the time, but also
mhm.
have something like a platform from which you work and bring excellence to what you're doing.
If you're enjoying the Leadership on the Rocks podcast, be sure to subscribe and follow so you don't miss a single episode. And also, please rate the show. We hope to earn 5 stars in serving you in leadership, and through your ratings, it'll help us get the word out about what we do here at Leadership on the Rocks. Now, back to the show. That's so good. Okay, I feel like I'm in therapy right now because I have another confession. I'm such a highly organized person that God actually revealed to me that it was a couple of years ago that I actually made structure an idol. Remember how I'm following man's best practice, structure, structure, structure. And I actually made that an idol in my life. And here's the point is structure is good. Just like food is good, but whenever you overindulge in it and it becomes an idol in your life, now you're off course. You've had a misalignment of your heart. And so in all of this, I'm learning to hold it of I still need and want structure, but it's not first. God is first and structure comes after that. And because it's a good part of stewardship. So, can I just ask you? I've just explained my mistakes that I've made. I made structure the idol. What are some common operational mistakes that you see Christian entrepreneurs make when trying to run their businesses?
Yes, and I will say, the idea of going to God first and seeking him and then having structure, there's a pattern there, right? Because you don't want to build structure for the wrong thing, right?
Mhm.
You're building out all this structure and then realize you get there and it's like, whoop, this is not it. So that's why there's an importance of, who you go to and when you go to that. But yeah, the idea that we can often focus on things that aren't actually when we need to focus on them. And
Mhm.
so we can always go back to the thing that we're most comfortable with as the thing that we want to continue to work on. And that's just going to be all of our tendencies, right? Like I'm good at XYZ. And so when I don't know what to do, like instead of like, hey, maybe the Holy Spirit can guide me, or there's some good counsel out there that I can go to and find out, then you're like, oh, I can make a logo. Maybe we need to rebrand, whatever it is, right? I say that because that's my background, right? And so that's the problems that we can often run into when we maybe get stuck, and instead of, maybe God's making some space for you to seek him or to seek wise counsel, instead of just like doing the busy work or doing something that you've done
Mhm.
maybe 100 other times and it just feels good because it feels like you're doing something. That would be something to really watch for.
Man, that's a huge operational mistake, and I feel like I have made that. We always tend to lean into our strengths, and we can actually over lean into them where it becomes a hurdle and an obstacle, right? You can lean into your strengths so much. And I think I'm thinking of so many things right now, but in the Bible, it talks about how, the church is the body of Christ, and with the body, there are many parts. And when everyone is stepping into their gifts and talents, the whole body becomes extremely high functioning. But whenever we, say, no, we only need this part, and we're going to lean into my strengths and my part of the body, um, you know, it doesn't function the way it needs to. And I think applying that into leadership is that's another reason you got to have wonderful people around you with different strengths. God has gifted people in different ways, and when you bring together the differences, and for example, I love brainstorming, ideation. I could sit all day long and come up with ideas, but man, execution, that's a struggle for me. And so that's not going to be a very good business if I'm just sitting here thinking of ideas, but don't execute on anything. So I got to have a partner in that. Now, I happen to be married to someone who's very good at execution. So he is my business partner in this, but I think that's what I was thinking of as you were talking about the operational mistake, because I've made it so many times over. I overcompensate in my strengths and then don't even consider the other things. That's not what God calls us to. So, in thinking about systems, right, organizing the chaos, and you support entrepreneurs in this specifically, what do you think are one or two foundational systems that will help leaders that are feeling overwhelmed or disorganized? Like, where should they start in building some organization and systems within their leadership or their business?
Yeah, for sure. I think one of the simple things that any business in today's world would be good to have would be a database where you can have all of your contacts in one place and easily access that information. And you would might call that a CRM, which is a customer relationship management tool. And so some people may have heard that term and like, what does that actually mean? It's just a way to organize the relationship that you have with your customers, your clients. And so we think about that in discipleship. We have our own terms internally that we use. And for us, it is part of the tend. So you tend your sheep, right? These are the customer
Mm,
relationships that you're going to have. And you want to make sure that they're not getting lost in the cracks and the information's being lost. So that's definitely a good place to start. Some people maybe are just like, I got a spreadsheet. And maybe if that's all you can do at the time, that's not bad. But think about there's a lot of great options out there. And of course, we're one of them, but that's a great place to look into. And of course, there's so many great tools and technologies that are available to people. And so the list is endless. But the CRM is definitely great. I mean, obviously it's right in the back of like Christian Business CRM. I have that in my background right here, but that's just a kind of a piece of what we
mhm.
do as a technology provider. And but yeah, email systems is another thing, right? That's a huge communication. I mean, everybody uses email today, right? And how do you implement that in a way that is efficient and is actually reaching the people? So everybody has a challenge probably with email when it comes to like,
Mhm.
how can I reach as many people as possible? You're not alone in that. Everybody has to work through that. But of course, being able
Yeah.
to communicate people with people is such a huge part of,
Hmm.
not only running business, but just in life, right? We got to know how to
Yeah.
communicate.
Yeah. Thinking about, we talk a lot about, I mean, leadership on the rocks, essential rocks here. You mentioned relationships and communication. That's huge. Doesn't matter what industry you're in, you have to focus on relationships with your stakeholders, whoever they may be. And then you need to work on communication to build that relationship because ultimately you're not selling, you're serving. And you're serving in some capacity, and that's going to help. So no matter what industry you're in, think about those questions, like reflect on God. How am I building relationships with the people that I serve? How am I communicating? And how can I be more organized in that so that it builds a better, understanding and better relationship? So good. I want to talk about your big vision because another thing about leadership is having big vision of this is where we're headed. And all of the systems and processes that we have are taking us in that direction. And so you have a big vision, seeing 1 million people discipled. So I want to give you space. Share what is that vision? Explain it to us.
Yeah. No, it's really beyond us, right? And I think that's when you're talking about leadership, and if you have a vision that you can accomplish on your own, it's not much of one, right? And
Mm,
and this actually came through our own prayer time, as my partner and I do have over the year, especially the past year, spent a lot of time daily praying. And we use a friend has it's literally called prayingbusiness.com. I recommend it. If you're in the business world, go check it out. You can sign up for free and you'll get prayer on the regular, which is amazing. So we're going through the book that they have, and this was one of the things that came out of it, that we were asking questions and dialoguing with the Lord, and so it wasn't something I was just like, what would be a good thing for us to do? It was really birthed out of prayer, and
mm,
this idea of 1 million disciple, and of course, like I said, way beyond what any one person can do. And so for us, it's the idea that we are working with others who are actively making disciples. And of course, the business is the first kind of audience for us, but it doesn't have to be that, of course. But we want to see us, for us, it's like equipping the equippers to the best of our ability so that they can go out and continue to do the thing that God's called them to do. We're here to amplify and facilitate the thing that God's put in our partners' hands, and in that we'll see 1 million discipled.
oh, it's so beautiful. Think about you're equipping the equippers. I love that because as leaders, is that not what you're doing? Like the individual contributors that work under you, for you, whatever, they're the ones going out and doing the tasks and really touching base with stakeholders, right? And so if you want to increase, oh, let's go with the Chick-fil-A example. And so there's an owner and an operator of Chick-fil-A's, and then there's probably management. And then you have the people that like are standing outside in the heat taking your order or at the counter. They're the ones that are actually engaging with, as they would call, the guests. And so if you want great service, man, all that stuff has to filter down to that individual contributor of engagement. And I mean, you're hitting the nail on the head with that. Big vision is number one, it's birthed from God. God is the one that created that. But then the how you do that, how you join God in his vision that he's given you is equipping others and pouring into them. And it will trickle out and out and out. Think of that ripple effect of throwing a stone in water, and it's just going to go out from there. And it's not that you did it all, but you were obedient in the one action God called you to, and it's just going to ripple from there. It's so exciting. I love it. I love the vision.
Yeah.
Thinking about shepherding the people that you lead, excuse me, can you give us some examples of what shepherding looks like? Because we're mixing farming stuff and some theology stuff and all of that. So now let's transition a little bit to like application. If I am a Christian and God has put me in a position to have influence, leadership is just influence over people, over a group of people, whether again, be at home or in business or I'm an entrepreneur. You know, what does that look like in real life? What does shepherding look like?
Yeah, so shepherding is not this movement that you may have heard of. There's literally something called the shepherding movement.
Mm.
So if you Google that, it's a little bit on the weird side, because they're like, you couldn't do anything unless you asked the official shepherd, like, is it
Oh.
okay for me to do this? So that's not what that is.
Mhm.
So if you think about Psalm 23, I think one of the key things that you learn from, that's a good blueprint, right, of what it looks like to shepherd people. Like, we're going to look to Jesus once again. He's our good shepherd. And one of those things is leading to still waters. And so when I see something in the Bible that talks about water, is awesome. I often think about, being refreshed, right? And being in the presence of God and those kind of things. So if you're shepherding someone, you're going to lead someone into the presence of God through your leadership, especially as, if we're believers out here, what your leadership is going to bring is refreshing to others. And the other thing is lie down in green pastures is another idea. Once again, it's that rest. And so when we lead others, we should be bringing a sense of rest and relaxation and refreshment on some level. Like people should not be more exacerbated after spending time with us. They should be filled up and ready to go do the thing that they've been called to do, right? So that's a part of the shepherd call that I see for any of us, right? No matter, we're all leaders on some level. And so if we're leading someone and the people leave and they're like, man, I'm glad that's over, we need to check back in on how we're doing. Are we actually leading in a way that brings people, refreshed in their spirit and ready to do what God's called them to do?
Oh, thank you. That's such a great way. How do people feel when they leave your presence? Let's start there. And if you don't know, start asking, start having scheduling one-on-ones and just asking, asking for that feedback. It's so good. Mark, as we come to a close and thinking about, shepherding and discipling and really being the leader that God has called us to, and starting with surrender, um, what are some key takeaways that our listeners need to apply to grow in their faithful leadership?
Yeah, it's going to start with making room for God, right? That 2000 cubit rule. That is a core value that we live by. And I think it's just a core value in life that we are always making room for God, no matter what. Doesn't matter if you're in business as
Mhm.
an entrepreneur or you're the Chick-fil-A person taking the order. You can make room for him wherever you go. And in discipleship, we're all in the discipleship journey. Like in the business world, I think a lot of people maybe don't understand that, but we are getting there. I think more and more people are understanding that where you're called to, you have an opportunity to lead and to bring people closer to Jesus, whether you're talking about it overtly or not. The way
Mhm.
you comport yourself and just interact with others is an open door for people to meet him and know him better. And also the systems and the things that you can do on a regular basis that help you become a better leader, become a better business person. Think about those things as well. Like how can you be simplify? How can you make things more efficient so that you can serve people more effectively?
Great advice, man. So good. Okay, but now I'm going to flip it. You just gave us such great advice on what we should be doing as leaders. And I love that you added simplification because, man, we make things so complex. But now let's go the opposite. What's one poor decision you would warn our leaders to avoid? Like, don't do this one thing. Come on, you're better than that.
Yeah, I alluded a little bit to this earlier about just doing the thing that you're most familiar with because that's the most comfortable with. That's a
Mhm.
mistake. And so within that is it adjacent to that is looking for to do everything on your own, right? Like there are moments where you're starting things and you just got to carry more things than you need to. But just as you said before, every joint
Mhm.
supplies in the body of Christ. And so, who are the people around you that can come and give you support in ways that really help you become everything that God's called you to be? We are not to do this alone. And so,
Mhm.
that would be something. Like I said, there can be seasons where you kind of got to take on more than you may want to, but at the end of the day, we need to find those people that God's placed in our lives to really help us go beyond just, you know, helping it. The help is like, I'm just doing the things I like to
Mhm.
do and I'm not going anywhere. So these other
Yeah.
people can come alongside and be like, hey, we can help with some other things as well and really, propel you forward in what God's called you to do.
Man, I really feel all of that. And I'm going to summarize it how I'm internalizing it this way is I often am the no for other people. I never even give them the opportunity to serve and help or invite them to the table because I think I'm being nice of I'll just take care of it. I just become the default person. And out of that mindset of I'm being nice by just taking it all on to protect them, it's actually pride and selfishness because it's really the deceiving part is it's pride of, well, I want to control it because I know how it'll be done and it'll be done at the level at which I want. And then two is just, it feeds my arrogance. And so releasing that of saying, I can't do it all, sitting in that humility, I can't do it all. I need others to come along. And then you start really recognizing the people that you invite in. You start becoming in awe of, wow, God really gifted you in this area. And that can also attack the ego. And so it's a dose of humility. And I thank you so much for bringing that to light because it's so important. And it's often masked by I'm being nice, but burnout is not a badge of honor. It's actually a bunch of selfishness hidden in that. So that's been
Amen.
my lesson learned. So,
Amen.
Mark, where can our listeners go to learn more about you, your services, and supports for business leaders at Sheep Feast?
Yeah, so sheepfeast.com is our website, and you can find a lot of stuff there. Our socials will be linked up there. We have our podcast, 2000 Cubit Rule, which is on our YouTube channel. So if you search, that was a fun thing about having the name Sheep Feast. No one else uses it. So if
Yeah.
you Google it, you'll probably find us before anything else. And so that's great. And we do have a website called disciplемybusiness.com that can go right to the services that we provide, talking about the whole systems and
Mhm.
trying to help people simplify their tech stack. That's where you can find that.
That's awesome. Mark, thank you so much for the work you're doing and supporting businesses through a faith-based approach of discipleship. It's so needed. I'm just so excited about the work you're doing. And thank you so much for being here and sharing your expertise with us.
It's great to be with you, Bethany. I enjoyed our time together.
All right. Thank you so much. And guys, until next time, continue putting in the work of building your life and leadership on the rocks, the essential rocks. God bless. Remember, the most essential rock you can build your life and leadership on is the rock of Jesus Christ. Today's Bible verse comes from John chapter 21, verse 17. He said to him the third time, Simon, son of John, do you love me? Peter was grieved because he said to him the third time, do you love me? And he said to him, Lord, you know everything. You know that I love you. And Jesus said to him, feed my sheep.